Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to Tecmo Bowl Matchmaking School. We have 4 lessons that we're going to be going over here tonight. I'm going to try, I do have it scripted. So, going to try to keep things moving as best I can. I do tend to drone here. But let's transport ourselves to the 2024 Omaha Tecmo Bowl National Championship in our minds, right? And we have just won the toss. And now we got to pick a matchup. We're not providing any outs this year. There's no deferrals. You can't just pick your team and be player 2. You're going to have to come up with a matchup. So, here's how the coin toss is going to work. Flip the coin. Okay, I won. Now I call the matchup. After I do that, my opponent has 2 options. He can pick one of the 2 teams that I called in the matchup. If he does, then he's player 2. I'll be player 1, get the other team. Or he can choose to be player 1, which then gives me my choice of the 2 teams that I called. And I'll get my pick, and then I'm player 2. Now, I'm sure you know the ability to choose to be player 1 is an option. I like that about our coin toss system. I've played in some tournaments where the coin toss winner calls matchup and is automatically player 1. I think that's just handing the game to him, right? The way we do it, you give the coin toss loser the opportunity to protect themselves a little bit, and it's a means to start the game. I'm not really looking to give a huge advantage to one person or the other. But speaking of advantages, the first question we're going to tackle here is how big of an advantage is being player 1. All right? The only difference in terms of programming between player 1 and player 2 is that player 2's field goals don't go quite as far. It's either 1 or it's 3 yards. I've read both. I never have sat down and figured out exactly what it is. In my experience, and I played hundreds of games, I've only had a few come down to like actual max distance field goals. So that is, in my opinion, it's not really a difference maker. The real difference between player 1 and player 2 is up here, right? It's in the old noodle. Your brain is used to seeing your guys on the left side of the screen, with your offense moving from left to right, because that is the majority of our experience with it. You know, you got to figure about half your competitive games are that way, and all of the games you played against the computer, whether it's Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Super Bowl, you're on the left and you're moving to the right. Okay, your brain is used to it. You may not notice the difference, but your brain does. Shout out Red Letter Media. Now, the greatest Tecmo Bowl player who ever lived, Brad Bell, the founder of the Omaha tournament, he kept data on, I believe it was well over 100 games, tracking the difference between player 1 and player 2, and he found that there did seem to be an inherent advantage to player 1. He noticed a positive win rate, a few more yards per rushing attempt, fewer interceptions. It was his opinion that player 1 does have a slight advantage. Of course, these days, we have a significant source of data, and that is the Tecmo Bowl League, our online draft league. Played a dozen seasons over not quite 2.5 years. Now, records for the first 11 seasons show a 59% win rate for player 1 across 571 tracked games based on what I saw when I looked this up earlier. Right? Never, not even in a single season, did the home team, player 1, lose more games than they won. The 59% number itself might be a little misleading. There's 1 year, season 9, where the player 1 win rate was insane. It was almost 75%. So it's usually not like that. So if you throw out the highest and you throw out the lowest, and then you add up the other 9 and you average them out, it comes out to 57.5% win rate for player one. Drew, and I did not see exactly how he arrived at this figure, but he has determined that player one advantage has been worth 3.86 points per game. Now, these numbers I think are significant in a few ways. Let's talk about the 57.5% win rate. One, it shows that over the long term, hundreds of games, player one advantage is definitely a thing. 57.5% is a 15-point swing in winning percentage. That's statistically significant. If that was a presidential election, that would be a blowout, right? But it also shows that any given game is still essentially almost a coin flip, right? And this 3.86 advantage that Drew has come up with is also significant because it's slightly more than a field goal. And I have to wonder how many player two comebacks have been stymied on their last drive because they needed 6 instead of 3 and couldn't get it. So these are things to keep in mind, right? Given these numbers, it is clear that player one is indeed a thing, right? But it's not the only thing. You need to be careful not to put yourself in a situation where you wind up with player one, right? But you have a team that you're not familiar with or comfortable playing with. Or you just have handed your opponent one of the best teams in the game. There are going to be guys at this tournament who are so horny for Chicago, you can smell it on them, right? So you need to think twice about handing over the keys to a great team to your opponent, all for the sake of getting player one. You need to, at the very least, be sure that you can play with whatever team that you're going to wind up with. Now that's what I wanted to cover for the first lesson. All right. Is player one a thing? Player one's a bit of a thing. It's not the only thing.